Welcome to all. I want to call this special meeting to order. First order of business is roll call.
Ms. Parker? Here. Ms. Kinzer?
Present.
Ms. Hopkins?
Present.
Mr. Fulbright?
Here.
Mr. Moore is present. Mr. Atkinson?
Here.
Mr. Sims?
Here.
Mr. Beaver?
Here.
Mr. Howell?
Here.
Ms. Morency?
Here.
Mr. Dudley? We have 10 present. It's quorum.
And just so you know, Mr. Dudley had a really bad fall and is in NHC, and it's really quite serious, and I hope you will remember him in your prayers. In call meetings, we don't have a moment of silence and generally have the pledge or any of that, but I just want all of you to know to keep him in your prayers. I don't think, the attorney says I don't need a motion to approve the agenda, but it's written on here, so I will entertain a motion if we need to. Mr. Atkinson?
Motion.
All right. Is there a second to the motion? Ms. Parker seconded the motion. Any discussion? Can we do a voice vote on this instead of a paper vote? Okay. All right. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? And just so you all know, the system, you know how technology is great when it works. And the last board meeting we had a difficulty with the voting system that TSBA provides us. And we didn't have time to hook up the old one and everything, so we're going to do, if any motions are made, we're going to do it by paper ballot. Each member will sign a ballot and cast their vote and pass it to me, and then I will read the votes and record the votes, just so you know. And it's only doing it because technology is only great when it works, and it's not working tonight. So, the first order of business is board action in regard to the expiration of the superintendent's contract, including possible renewal, non-renewal, and or removal. Dr. Marzak's contract is through the end of June, so we're a little less than 6 months out. So it's time to just have that discussion. Is there any comments or anybody have? We can't discuss anything unless we have a motion. Do I hear a motion? Mr. Moore?
Yeah, I'll make a motion for this board not to renew the superintendent's contract at its termination.
All right. Mr. Moore has moved that Dr. Marzak's, the superintendent's contract not be removed. Is there a second to that motion? Mr. Howell seconded the motion. Is there any discussion? Seeing no lights, then we are ready to vote. I don't know whether to pass it. Should I come pick them up? I don't know.
I'll pick them up.
I'll let Mr. Beaver pick them up. Here.
They're going to put their names on those ballots.
The names are on the ballots, and I'm dated an envelope to secure the ballots once they're done, and we have a thing to record them this week. Okay, and I'm going to shuffle them up so there's no one goes first or whatever. The first one is Nathan Atkinson. No. Donna Morency. No. Chad Howell. Yes. Denny Beaver. Yes. My hands are shaking. I'm sorry. Kinzer. Yes. Parker. Yes. Hopkins. No. Sims. Yes. Fulbright. Yes. And Moore. Yes. What is the count?
7-3.
7-2. So that motion does pass. All right, the next item on the agenda is the board action is discussion of the action on the next steps in the event of the superintendent's contract is not renewed. We put this on the agenda because we felt like that we couldn't just have a vote like this without discussing what next steps are if that was necessary. Mr. Moore?
I would like to make a motion, that the board immediately began the process for a search and selection of a new superintendent for when that contract has expired.
All right, the motion, if I can word it right, is that the board start immediately a search and selection for the new superintendent. There was more to it, wasn't there? At the end of that term of the contract. Mr. Howell seconded the motion. Is there any discussion?
The search starts now.
As the search starts now. Okay.
First now,
Is there any discussion? Ms. Parker?
I guess I just have a question. So, as I understand it, if that motion were to be approved, then are we saying if we find our person and they could start June 1st, then we're not going to have them start on June 1st? Is that what your motion's saying?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Howell?
I mean, I would say that would be dependent upon, if Dr. Marzak leaves early, then we would obviously need that person to start sooner, but, that's kind of moving parts that we'll have to figure out as things happen, I would assume.
Any other discussion?
Yeah, good.
Yes, Mr. Fulbright?
How are we gonna go about with the details of this? Because we're not just gonna put an ad on Craigslist and hope somebody applies. How are we gonna flesh this out to know which direction how we're gonna go about doing this? Who will be tasked with that, I guess, is my question.
I would think the board would be tasked with it, but I would think we would need to maybe have a retreat or a work session. I'll let you speak, Mr. Moore.
Okay, sorry about that. I guess my intention would be to, again, flesh that out after the fact. My goal is to go ahead and signify that we're starting that process. I would expect that the chair would pretty soon call a meeting of some kind or a work session of some kind where we start to work out the details. I know previously we used a national search firm. There are other options out there that we can look at, and I would expect that, again, the chair could call a meeting and we could talk about what that looks like. And I would like to, as soon as possible, start that process. It's not something I want to wait a long time to do. So I would hopefully in the next few weeks we can have a meeting called to be able to start to discuss that, what that looks like, what the board chooses to go with. I think, again, we have several options we looked at last time that maybe we could put together and consider what direction we want to go as this board and go from there.
Mr. Sims?
I don't know if an amendment to this would be right, or if I can make a motion after this vote. I'm uncomfortable with letting the contract run its full term. And like I said, I can either wait, I can add an amendment at this point, or once this goes through. I don't know, I didn't know if Mr. Moore's motion, if this was just saying, yes, we want it to run its full term and start looking for a replacement, or if this was just immediately start looking for the replacement.
So my motion would be, and the way they all worded it was that way, so that at the conclusion of whatever the existing superintendent contract is, whatever that ends up being, whether it be where it is now, or if the board takes some other action to change that in some other way, it would still be valid is the way I look at that. And if you want to do some other action after this, I think that would be up to you. Okay. Does that answer?
Yes.
Okay, with seeing no lights, then we are ready to vote. Shuffle them up a little bit. Will Sims, yes. Have you got the motion up?
Shirley's reading me.
Shirley, can you read the motion? The motion is, that we would begin the search for a new, I'm not wording this right, I know, Mr. Moore, can you state it better? All right. I think what, I'll let him read the motion as it's stated, but the essence would be that Dr. Martin's contract is not up until the end of June. We would be, as a board, starting the process of a search for a new superintendent. Correct?
That's correct. The motion is to begin the search and selection process now, to fill the position for when the contract is up. In June, or whenever. I'll be honest, my statement was when the contract is closed out or ended, at whatever point that is.
Whenever that is, right. Okay, next, Fulbright is yes.
It was the first one.
The first one, let me go back. Okay. All right, sign this and all. Okay. Will Sims voted yes. Mr. Fulbright voted yes. Mr. Moore voted yes. I have a vote with no and no name on it. Ms. Parker voted yes. Ms. Kinzer voted yes. Ms. Morency voted yes. Mr. Beaver voted yes. Mr. Howell voted, excuse me, let me back up. Mr. Beaver voted no. Mr. Howell voted yes. And Ms. Hopkins voted yes. Mr. Atkinson voted yes. This is probably yours with no name on it, okay. So that would be 9-1, correct? So that motion does pass. Okay, then that's all I have. That's the agenda items that we have. So unless there's anything else, Mr. Sims?
I would like to make a motion to, buy out Superintendent Marzak's contract through the end of the year, through the end of his contract, effective the end of the work week that we're currently in.
Is there a second to that motion? Fulbright. Okay, second. Mr. Fulbright seconded the motion. Is there any discussion? Mr. Atkinson?
What would be the cost of the buyout?
I don't know. I think that would have to be negotiated. I mean, I guess whatever the cost of the rest of his contract would be, I don't know.
Yeah. Unearned salary plus benefits, all the benefits, the entitlements, the
insurance benefits, everything you pay between now and the end of the term, the contractual end of the term. And I don't know, I mean, that would be me and HR sitting down together and trying to figure out what the monetary equivalent of that would be. And I can't tell you sitting here, as of that date. And my question to the board is this in the form of an offer to the superintendent, or is this a mandatory buyout?
I would think it would be a mandatory. I mean, as long as we follow our obligation to pay out his contract in full, I don't know that it would be voluntary.
Okay.
Dr. Marzak?
So, Mr. Sims, according to my contract, so the employment contract may be terminated by a mutual agreement of the parties, retirement, disability, or death of the director of the board for just cause. So, this would fall under mutual agreement of the parties. So if the board wanted to buy out my contract, then, Mr. Wolliver and HR would get together. They would send, I guess, the offer, Mr. Wolliver, to my attorney, and then we would go back and forth there until there was a mutual agreement of the parties, correct?
If the board's saying this is a mandatory buyout, then what I would do is work with HR to come up with a number, and then I would send that to you. Obviously, you might not agree with the number. That may have to come back to the board for ratification. But if it's a mandatory buyout of the contractual term, then it would be payment to you of everything that's due under the contract, and that would be the extent of it.
Parker?
Can I call for an executive session so we can have a discussion with our attorney about what these terms would be?
I don't have a problem with that. Is that necessary?
I'll do what the board wishes.
What are the wishes of the board? Say yes, yes? Okay. All right, then we're gonna meet. Okay, we're gonna call the meeting back to order. And Charlie, do you have the motion as, okay. Do you have the motion as it was given? I'll tell you. The motion is to buy out Dr. Marzak's contract. With removal by the end of the week.
Yes.
Okay. And it was seconded by Mr. Fulbright. Is there any more discussion?
Yes.
Oh, excuse me, Mr. Atkinson?
I don't agree with the buyout like this. We don't know what the total cost is gonna be as of right now. In my personal opinion, if we let him go ahead and work his contract out, I don't think he would cause any problems or any issues with the teachers or the students or the school board or anything. I think he will carry on with the job he's doing. I don't feel like he will harm the school system in any way. It's just my feelings, my personal opinion with him. And like I said, I do not agree with the buyout at all.
Hopkins?
Me as well, and, I receive calls, teachers, emails that whatever happens, they still need to be able to run their classrooms, try to finish out. The last thing you want to do is have teachers all disheveled all over the place, and they're trying to worry about who their new boss is going to be. You might get somebody you don't like, you might, whatever the case may be, but like I said, like Mr. Atkins said, I think he's doing a job, and he'll continue to do what he needs to do and still run things and do his best that he can do, until the contract's up as well. I don't agree with the way this is going right now.
Mr. Fulbright?
Thank you. I do think it would be fair to him and to everybody else just to say, let's break ranks, let's go our separate ways. He can have opportunity to find a job. We can have opportunity to move on. I do feel very uncomfortable, though, voting on something without knowing the dollar figure. So with that said, I think I would like to make an amendment to move this, or maybe it's not even an amendment, maybe it's, let me rephrase that. Can we take this up at a future meeting, Jake?
You could table it,
Table it?
but you'd have, excuse me? Two votes.
Two-thirds.
Okay.
And if Tommy's not here, that's gonna be one that's not gonna count. Not two-thirds present.
To table, okay.
Movement. Withdraw the motion. I mean, I'm throwing out options there if you're looking at potentially getting it down the road. And now that you have a motion in a second, yeah.
I just think, well, and I guess I'd be partially to blame because I seconded this, but not knowing the dollar figure really does trouble me. Let me think on that. Come back to me.
Mr. Moore?
Thank you. So I know I made the other two motions here tonight to discuss, to kind of get these things going. And to be frank, those were some motions that I wasn't too happy with. If it had been my preference, things would have been done differently. While I do feel personally that it's time for us to look at other directions as a school board and as a county, I have no desire to terminate that contract tonight or any time in the next week or whatever. I feel like we do have a professional in this position. I feel like we have a contract in place, and that we can take this time to keep a stable environment, and continue working while he finishes out his contract, which is what he agreed to do. And I think we as a board should agree to finish that out as well. Ultimately, I know there are some concerns that which I'm not quite sure where they're coming from, that perhaps that because this has taken place, that the superintendent is going to go off the rails and just start doing all kinds of crazy things. I don't feel like that's going to happen. Ultimately, as a school board, we are still responsible for every decision that comes across this board, up or down, yes or no. That includes the budget that's going to be coming up. So if anything gets through here that we don't like, it's our own fault. So I would encourage my fellow board members to let this play its course out. Let us focus more on moving ahead, which is selecting the next person to lead this district, and let Dr. Marzak continue to do his job through the end of the contract.
I believe Mr. Atkinson was next.
Hey, that was a great speech.
Don't encourage.
I agree with it, and wholeheartedly. And now if we can come to terms, if he feels like he's ready to go, then we can come some time, a mutual agreement. Then yes, if he feels like he's ready to go, yes, we can come to a mutual agreement then we can vote on it then. That way we got the monetary value there. So, yeah, right now, I can't support this.
Mr. Beaver?
Thank you, ma'am. Well, you know, I feel that, you know, when we take a vote and say we're ready, to not extend Dr. Marzak's contract, you know, just look at the message that we're sending our teachers, you know, our principals, our support staff, that, hey, we no longer want to follow Dr. Marzak's leadership, but, oh, by the way, next 5 months, he's still gonna be your boss. He's still gonna sit there in the big office and draw the big bucks and make the decisions. And, you know, from a lot of what I'm hearing about the, teachers' morale, it's way down. And for us to sit here and tell them, hey, we don't want this man, but you're gonna have to have him as your boss for the next 5 months. I don't see how that we can make a decision that way.
Ms. Morency?
I agree that without a dollar figure that, I can't support doing that. I also, know that this board doesn't have a plan. At least I know that we haven't discussed it. And going forward, I don't see how we go forward without a plan. So my suggestion would be that we, wait on this, that we have some kind of, meeting that we can do and have a planning session to see where we're gonna go in the future. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of money that, we don't have extra money to spend. It'd buy a lot of books. It'd buy, you know, so I just don't, at this point, I just can't vote for that.
Mr. Fulbright?
This is the time of the meeting I put Doug on the spot. Do you have the ability to give us a ballpark, now this is nothing binding or any kind of formal request, but just a ballpark figure of what 5 months of salary and benefits would be for this position?
If you were to do something tonight, it would be 5 months of pay and then 1 pay period. And so with all the ancillary benefits, and I was going to kind of try to avoid this, but you're looking at around $100,000. And that is a ballpark figure.
Right.
But I think another meeting would give time to calculate what it would be truly to the penny.
Right, and I do apologize for putting you on the spot because that's kind of an unfair question, but I did want some, I mean, because it's different if it's $10,000 or if it's $500,000 or if it's $100,000. So that at least gives me some sort of, you know, range of where we're shooting at, so thank you. And, I mean, I think that sounds realistic based off of just the little bit of knowledge of the numbers I have, so I think that would be reasonable. Thank you.
Excuse me, Ms. Morency?
And also remember that you would have to, include the interim salary in that figure.
I want to...
It was not included in that figure.
I'm not comfortable in making this decision tonight without knowing a dollar figure. I do think it's something we can pick up at another meeting, at another time, when we have more information. I don't see what a weight would change particularly. I just don't think I can vote to do that tonight, right now, without knowing what that dollar figure is and what our, and then without that, then what do we do from there and what we do about an interim? There's a lot of discussion that needs to take place. And that might be part of the discussion we need to have as to what the motion we just passed, as to what we're gonna do going forward. Mr. Sims?
Thank you. The decision, my decision to make the motion has more to do with, I know a school system is not a business. However, we still operate a $100 million budget, and you have to, in some ways, treat it as a business. And when a business notifies their head person that they're gonna be let go, you don't continue to allow them to be in the head position. I'm not saying I believe Dr. Marzak would do anything, detrimental to the schools. However, it's still a business decision to let him go. I'm not trying to shortchange on a dollar amount. Pay him what he is due, and even he might make money if he can find employment before the contract were to end anyway. So it possibly would benefit him anyway. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Mr. Beaver?
Thank you, ma'am. Well, a lot of the problems that we currently have is finance. And here recently, this past year, the county commission adopted 81 Act, a modified act. And when it came time to select who all was going to be on the finance committee for the county, that's where the modification came into the 81 Act. And the board chair was selected to be on the, to represent the school board. But the original was for the superintendent to be on the school board, on the finance committee, but our county commissions, that's where they modified that act. And, you gotta be blind if you don't see that the problems that we're having, getting our finances through, getting things taken care of financially. And I believe that that's one thing that we need to look at is we got the budget season coming up here real soon. And how's the county commission going to react by here? We're saying we don't want to extend his contract, but oh, by the way, you can sit here and pull together this budget one more year. And we've had budget problems year after year. And so, I just don't see how we can do this and still continue to do business like we need to be doing.
Any other lights? Any other discussion? Ms. Parker?
I will say, Mr. Moore said he wasn't real happy with the motions that he had to make. Can't say that I'm necessarily real happy with this motion, to pay out. But I think that it would be a good step for our system. I think that we have to remember as board members what our job is and our responsibility. What we say our vision is educating every child for life. And so if keeping Dr. Marzak in the seat that he's in, when we've just said we don't want him in that seat for another 5 months, if that's the best thing that we can do for the children, then I think we know how we should vote. My concern is the things that we have coming up. And whether it's an interim that we know or an interim we don't know right now, I just think back the last time we were faced with this decision and the things that were done in that time period. A new central high school funding was established. There was a cooperative relationship with the county commission that occurred once we had an interim in there, and something that had been kind of bogged down for years all of a sudden went through. Another thing, when the interim was there, I think she hired 5 new principals, and I think all of those principals continue to work for this district in some fashion. I think 4 of them are still in their current positions, and 1 works at central office. And hiring is something that's been a concern for me with Dr. Marzak. I'll just be very frank. We struggled to find a finance director. We had VACO for over 18 months. We currently have an interim HR director. I don't know why it's still an interim situation, but it is. I was looking at the website. We still don't have a data coordinator, which I think is a position that when we start talking about test scores and that information would be very valuable to have. That position's been vacant for over a year and hasn't been filled. So those are some of the positions that I think we've got to have somebody in place to make those decisions. And to be completely honest, I don't know that I want Dr. Marzak making those hires right now if we've decided that we want to go a different course. I agree with what Mr. Sims said. I think we should honor the contract that we agreed to. It is a lot of money, but I think that we will get that money back from the county commission. I believe that based on what I have heard about recent budget amendment meetings, if we continue on this path, we can pretty much accept that we're going to have the same budget that we had last year with no additional funds from the county commission. That's just what I've gathered from conversations with some of them. I obviously haven't talked to all of them, but I think that's a huge detriment to our teachers and to our students for what we want to do. So I really think that we need to, what may be $100,000 now, it may end up saving us money in the long run if we are able to secure more funding to benefit our students. And I think that goes back to what our core mission, what our core vision is, educating every child for life. And I think we can do that if we all work together.
Mr. Howe.
So my purpose here, first and foremost, my priority here is the students. Our teachers teach those students, and I would prefer to have a smooth transition with a plan of continuity in place. Stopping here, terminating him tonight or tomorrow or next week, then we have to hire an interim, and then we have to hire someone to fill that position. That doesn't sound like a smooth transition. That doesn't sound like continuity. That doesn't sound very good at all. Budgeting processes and procedures that we've had problems with, I don't think that's his fault necessarily, completely. We're the ones who send that budget up or down. We're the ones who take things out of a line item with or without knowing the consequences of that. He doesn't necessarily have to do that. We make those decisions. Yes, we have a different way of doing things with a new finance director or budgeting office, who I feel very confident in. I felt very confident going into last year's budget season with his team in place. We knew the numbers. We knew what to expect. And so far, this year's budget has been very good, I believe. So as far as any concerns with budget and budget season, if you've got him in place, we kind of know what to expect. You have an interim who will be getting a budget that's the interim's budget, and then we have to hire someone, and then we do hire someone new. Maybe it's that interim, maybe it's not. I don't see that being very continuous. So when any business hires or fires someone in a key spot, they have a plan first and foremost of how things are going to run and be transitioned. If you don't, that's just bad business.
Is there a light on?
Sorry,
Yes,
it
Ms.
went off
Parker.
on me. I understand what you're saying, Mr. Howell. Just as somebody that sat here the last time that we went through this, I will tell you that having the interim was not a bad. It just wasn't a bad move. The discussion about teachers, all of a sudden, things like Teachers Council was established under the interim. Weekly memos started going out under the interim. There are good things that can happen and can build upon what Dr. Marzak's doing, and has done. But again, I feel like this would be a very generous offer to him. If he knows that he's not going to be here on July 1st, this is freeing him up to go and find a new job. And he doesn't have to put Maury County Public Schools first. He can put Chris Marzak first. and go and find a job that fits him, fits his family, fits where he wants to go. But it also frees us up to try to work together to figure out what the next step is. The reason why this is all so awkward, it has to be awkward. It was awkward the last time we did this. It just was. Because we all don't sit back in, smoke-filled rooms and really figure this out. The Sunshine Act kind of tries to make sure that we don't do that. So it does feel very awkward when we're going through this process in front of everybody, but this is leadership, and we do have to figure it out. But I just think, the conversations that I've had, I'll just be honest, I haven't gotten that many emails, I haven't gotten that many phone calls, but I haven't gotten one in support of Dr. Marzak. Now, obviously, that could just be because of where I sit and where people know I stand. But the teachers that I've heard from, they just want to teach. They don't want this hanging over their head and us coming back for another meeting and trying to figure out, is he going, is he not going, is he going to be here until June? When he comes in, do I let him, what do I do? If he says I'm not doing this right, do I listen to him? Is he still my boss? I just feel like there's so much more uncertainty if we keep this the way that we're talking about potentially keeping it, as opposed to just making a clear break. I think Mr. Sims said in the business, was talking about this being a business, and it is. It's a $100 million business. It's bigger than anything else in the county. And I think there's a thing called garden leave. So, if a board decides they want to send somebody, go garden. Go do what you need to do. Let him go find his next job. If it's not going to be here with Murray County, we're actually, I think, doing him a favor, and I think that's a good thing, personally. I feel like we can work out the numbers. I really do. But if part of this board if we can't come together, it's just going to make for another 5 more months of just bickering, and I'm really just kind of tired of the bickering. I really am. I just want to move forward as positively as we can. And while there are some people that feel like they can work with Dr. Marzak, I haven't gotten a phone call from Dr. Marzak in probably over 2 years on an issue. I just don't have that open door relationship with him ever since the last vote that we took on this. That may be partly my fault, but I also kind of put it on him too. So I feel like it would be better if we try to move forward. And I feel like the board made a pretty resounding statement at 7-3 that we want to move forward. So let's just move forward and try to figure out how to do this in a way that's fair to us, fair to our students, fair to our teachers, and fair to Dr. Marzak.
Mr. Atkinson.
The only thing I want to see change, I just don't like the mandatory issue with it. Let's try to do a mutual. I just don't like this mandatory. Hey, you're out of here. It could lead into any kind of litigations or anything like that. Lawsuits, whatever. I'd rather do a mutual agreement. If he wants to leave, great. Let's come up with some kind of mutual number. Like I said, we haven't got a number yet, a solid number. Let's work on this instead of having a mandatory.
One last little point. I did get several emails and phone calls today, probably like everybody else did. And we keep talking about teachers want this, teachers want that. And the one thing that I did hear quite a bit was, don't let this just linger. Make a decision and cut. Don't let things linger. Just let it just hang out there. If we're going to do something, we need some finality. We need some closure. And I think this is one of the ways about going about after that. It's just going to, how many people have said we don't like the uncertainty? Teachers are going to have uncertainty with an interim. Well, they've got uncertainty now, based off of what we've just done. So I think we just need to accept what we've done, accept where we're going, make a decision, go forward with this buyout, and provide some finality to what's going on.
I see no lights, so we're ready to vote.
it doesn't end that.
Throw it at me. Somebody in the audience wants a motion repeated. Did you write it down? Okay. The motion was made to buy out Dr. Marzak's contract. The contract ends the last working day of this week, and the motion was made by Mr. Sims and seconded by Mr. Fulbright. Do I have all the ballots? Kristen Parker, yes. Ms. Kinzer, yes. Mr. Beaver, yes. Ms. Morency, no. Chad Howell, no. Mr. Atkinson, no. Mr. Sims, yes. Mr. Moore, no. Mr. Fulbright, yes. And Ms. Hopkins, no. That motion failed. I think we can take it up at another meeting, have a little time to look at some figures and go forward. Motion to adjourn, all those in favor say aye. Opposed? Okay, we're gonna take about a 10-minute break, and then we will adjourn down here for our work session. We're gonna take a 10-minute break, and then we're going to start our work session from the tables, and you all are welcome to stay, and thank you so much for coming.